Hey, good afternoon. Doug Pagitt in here on AM 950, Progressive Voice of Minnesota. As I was yesterday, my heart and voice are in Minnesota. My body is in West Michigan. So doing this remotely from the shores of West Michigan in a nice little town called Grand Haven. I mean, it's no Minnesota, but we're having a great time here. And hey, Hunter Haas, nice to chat with you. I've been thinking about you a lot since the election on Tuesday, and looking forward to hearing your read on this. I'm always interested in you and Brett both. You know, you represent that new generation. Some of us used to be the new generation. You know, some Gen Xers are. Used to be the people that all the advertisers and the futurists thought about, but not anymore. And good for them.
Now my generation's the one that they blame for all the problems.
That's right. Now you're the people that are just sitting at home living off of your parents and can't seem to get off the couch to go do something. We used to be those people, and before us, it was those long-haired baby boomers. So, but it kind of does matter. I think there's a lot that goes on in some generational changes, not just because people in their 20s or something are totally unique in their thinking, but there's some new impulses that are afoot. And so anyway, I was really interested, and as we were talking a bit off air, about your read on what happened in the election on Tuesday. And if you think, as a lot of us did, that when, especially in the governor's race, boy, you have Tim Walz and you have this Jeff Johnson, and it just seems like it's sort of back to the normal times when you'd have sort of boring candidates that represent their party and have been and they don't seem like they're going to be fiery, break the system personalities. And is that, do you think that's something more broad to the entire tone of the electorate, or do you think that's just that particular governor's race, and across the rest of the system we're really in for some big progressive change that a lot of us would like to see?
Well, I'm encouraged with what happened on Tuesday. Mm-hmm. And we should note, too, that Tim Walz's running mate is a Native woman. So it's not just a white male total top of the ticket.
Yeah,
and
right.
I mean,
That's good.
we're breaking down boundaries. I mean, Keith Ellison is the attorney general. We would have a Muslim attorney general. We have Ilhan Omar in CD5 would be the first Somali Muslim woman in Congress. So, no, I don't agree with that take. And also because at least Tim Walz isn't talking the same old boring issues. He wasn't running a middle-of-the-road campaign. He was running a progressive campaign, and that's what's most important to me.
Yeah. So for you, it's you're a substance guy about that, right? You're making the argument that there's some real substance in what's happening, and not just the what you might see at first blush. And I agree. I think that's the case. What I do find interesting, though, is that there's kind of a temperament, which I think is going to affect the election down ballot here in the midterms, because it could have been that a particular kind of candidates on either side would have turned up the heat a bit on the turnout. And I think that the nomination of Johnson on the Republican side is going to tap down turnout. I don't think there's going to be as many Republicans that are as fired up, sort of in their belly, and excited in the way that they might be, that they might have been around some other candidates. Even a Tim Pawlenty, who's about as non-exciting as you can get. But I think feeling like you're going back to those good old days would have fired up a bunch of Republicans, and I think they're going to have a little trouble getting turnout.
Well, you know what I think it would have done is gotten those more swayable voters. I think the base was going to show up no matter what, and they're going to show up for Johnson, but that isn't going to change anything. But Pawlenty would have got some people to vote for him as a Republican, and then chose some other ones down ballot as well. So I think that is going to hurt them, because they're not going to sway anyone necessarily with Jeff Johnson.
Yeah, because there was this thing with Republicans where if they supported Pawlenty, they thought Pawlenty's a good guy. He's a known commodity. Like, we're kind of getting back. And what I was afraid of with Tim Pawlenty, I'll just say, this is why I'm glad he's not in the race, is it would allow those Republicans who are totally freaked out by Donald Trump, as I think they all should be, to say, oh, see, we are going to come back to our senses, because that's going to be a big reckoning with Republicans, right? They're going to have to get back to the time when the hysteria and the fever broke, and they could start to. And Tim Pawlenty gives them the chance to start to say that. That with Tim Pawlenty, they could have said, okay, see, we've now straightened out the ship. We're now getting back to where we were before. He's kind of a moderate Republican. I don't consider him to be that, but he was an excuse train that people could have climbed on. And I think that was actually part of his rationale for running, was trying to give the impression that there could be you could run this film in reverse and start the script over again. And I'm glad they're not. And so I think Johnson's just less well known to people. He's not going to have that kind of storyline. I think people will be able to tag him to Trump, and they should tag him to Trump. And I think that's going to make a big difference in the state of Minnesota.
Yeah, that I totally agree with that analysis. I haven't heard someone put it that way, but yeah.
Well, that's what we do around here at 4:00. You know, we are a fresh perspective on these kinds of things. Yeah, go on.
No, yeah, just I agree.
Yeah. So with the people that you're hanging around with, right? I don't know how much you've told people about your particular slant on it, but you're engaged as I am inside of a progressive, or what some people call the Democratic wing of the Democratic Party, that kind of progressive side of things, you know. And do you find the people that you are talking to, the people in the groups that you're in, your friends, do you find them now after the election on Tuesday motivated and ginned up and ready to go? Or do you feel like people have that, they're still feeling that bit of loss if their candidate didn't take home the nomination?
I have seen people actually. I'm encouraged with what I've seen. Like I've specifically a couple of diehard Richard Painter supporters who, I mean, because Richard Painter is really critical of Tina Smith,
right.
And now I've seen them shift to what we have to do is push Tina Smith on these issues. Not we're not voting for her, but let's focus on getting her to change on the things we don't like about her,
right.
Which I really like that approach.
Yeah, I hope that happens. I know I went on a long spiel about this yesterday, so I won't do it again. But the need to come together and the need for people to re-engage in the excitement and not just in the act of voting. The thing that we need going now from the late August into early November is people talking up the need to be engaged in the voting part of being a citizen. Right. It's not the only part. It's not the highest level of civic engagement. Voting. It certainly is important. It's crucial, and you have to do it in this election. And that's the thing that I'm most worried about all of this is if people stop talking about it, they get such Trump fatigue, and they think, oh, it's only the midterms. We're not even to the halfway. We're not even to the halftime show yet of this overly long football game, that they're going to start to not be excited about talking about who the candidates are. I mean, even in the Ilhan Omar one, and she's going to be my representative in Congress, so I'm fully supportive of her and I'll vote for her. But because she's essentially uncontested, it sort of becomes, well, isn't that great? She's going to be our congressperson, but it's not the kind of thing that will stir up the energy of people in the 5th Congressional District and often in Minneapolis. And I'm concerned for that across the state, because we have to really build a sense of voting and winning to keep people in the flow of we are going to do something about the direction of this country and especially the damage that's being done by Donald Trump. Do you have any sense with the people you're around or hanging out? Do they feel that that passion to talk other people into being engaged in the political process?
So during the campaign, when I would speak with people that supported a certain candidate, I tried to ask that a lot. And I'd throw out another one. I go, what if this person wins? What are you going to do? And almost everyone said, well, I'm going to get behind them. So, I mean, obviously, a lot of people put a lot of time and energy and their heart in campaigns that didn't work out on Tuesday. So that feeling's devastating.
Yeah.
But I want to encourage those people that wasn't wasted time, because they turned people on to ideas and onto the process. And what I recommend is just rest up, take care of yourself, and that we're going to need you in November. So whenever you're ready, come back and hit it hard again.
Yeah, I agree. I think that's very well said, because what politics follows the rest of the cultural, what the Germans would have called the zeitgeist, or what people call the flow, or what the kind of cultural moment. And we are in a high level of fatigue and anger and frustration cultural moment. It's been that way for a long time in some pockets, and it's that way in many more pockets of our society now. And finding ourselves in that place, as I've said on the show before, there's not a lot of days you can do something about it on the political front. But November 6th, that's a day you can do something about it at your state legislative level, at your county level, of course, at the national level. That's the day when all of the reading, all of the thinking, all of the hand wringing and head shaking, you can actually put that to action. So to stay engaged and to bring people along with you for that day when the opinions that you have are going to be tallied up, that between now and November 6th, it feels to me it's so important to get those voters who find themselves to be frustrated once again, and to call them back into the action. And for those who are newly enraged and are just furious with the way things are going, to keep them going and to keep them moving.
Totally agree.
Yeah, well, this is AM 950, Progressive Voice of Minnesota, and we hope it's going to be not only your friendship, your partnership station, but we hope it's a pathway for you to find other people and to encourage them. So we'll be back here after the break. I'm Doug Pagitt. We'll be back after the break on AM 950, Progressive Voice of Minnesota. This is your hometown. Hey, welcome back. AM 950, thinking about my hometown. There, Minneapolis, St. Paul, suburbs of the Twin Cities. Hey, people know all about the Twin Cities, by the way. I was over here in, of course they do, right? But I was over here in West Michigan, where I am right now. And there was a street fair going on, and where they're selling things. And I was out talking to some guys selling bikes, and they said something about bicycles. And I said, I'm from Minneapolis. And they said, oh, they have a couple of great bike shops there, all this kind of thing. Really nice to sort of do that chit-chat. And then the guy just turns to me and says, so do you think Amy Klobuchar is going to be our next president? And yeah, he just launched right in, right? Like it's one of those things that makes you feel good as a Minnesotan. This recognition that people are paying attention to the political players, the political perspective, the political understanding that's coming out of Minnesota. And he was obviously a Democratic booster and a progressive guy, but he was asking that question when he heard Minnesota, and that's the thing we want. Now, I'm not sure that everyone's as encouraged as he was about Amy Klobuchar, but I like the idea that our leaders are national voices, and that what we do locally has that kind of national reputation. Hunter, do you get that much? Do you have friends around the country that think about their about Minnesota as a political force, as a political place to look, a shining star?
Yes. I lived in New York for a long time, and I remember just because Minnesota is the true blue state, I'd have people be talking about Minnesota politicians like they were their own, and I'm like, hey, I'm the one that's from Minnesota here.
That's right. We're glad to have you cheer them on.
We got a long history though of politicians like that, with like Humphrey, Mondale, Wellstone, and Al Franken was a very notable figure. But the politicians that come out of Minnesota are very interesting figures. Yeah,
I think they matter, and I want to call all of our elected officials or anyone seeking that office up to that level, because we live in this curious political construction, right? That we're states, but our states are part of a federal union, and that federal union has impact, and the states are what make up the whole. So what happens locally also happens in our state and also happens in our country. And we can't get away from, like, I am all for all politics being local, right? Because people live in particular places on particular pieces of ground. They drink water out of that comes from certain lakes and streams. And, our neighbors are the people right next to us, literally. So we do live in particular places, and it really matters. So the local aspect is incredible. But there are times when the national imagination is what our local expression needs to be paying attention to. And there are other times, frankly, where we don't have to be as concerned about that. And what's happening on the national level, we can let take care of itself. And that's part of the reason why I think that the perspective coming out of politicians and the people of Minnesota and radio stations like this and all the people who listen to this station, that it matters that we are contributing and thinking about and knowing about this national conversation, because people look to us, they turn to us, and I hope they will. I hope they'll continue to see Minnesotans as people that are making a contribution to how they could view the world and how they could engage.
Yeah, and the fact that this station even exists here, I mean, we have to be grateful for, because left-wing radio did not exist 15 years ago. And the fact that it's still here in Minnesota, that we have this, it's something I appreciate all the time.
Yeah, that's a great point. And that's not just us, because we're insiders saying that. I'm doing a bunch of coordinating for a big campaign called Vote Common Good, which is happening all across the country. We're going to 31 cities and trying to influence 32 congressional districts to flip Congress. And part of the work that we're doing is coming through with this big bus tour. So we want to get the word out. And when you start asking around, where are the progressive political radio stations in every town? Most of them don't have any. It's a shocking reality that what we have in Minnesota, the entire infrastructure, including AM 950, is something that doesn't exist in other places. And we need to figure out a way to do something about that, first of all. And that might be by driving up the market of people who care about progressive politics. I think that's a good way to do it. But also by providing an imagination and a way of thinking about this. Here at the 4:30 break, we're going to talk with Ryan Parker, who works in PR around movies, and we're going to talk about the role of movies in creating a social impact and political imagination. Curiously enough, conservatives have been using broader media to create a vision for an imagination for politics in our country in a way that has advocated their ideas to land more easily in our culture. So there's a lot of work that we have to do in order to get a more progressive mindset. And these moments between primary elections and election day is one of those periods when you start to create that excitement and that buzz. We're coming up on Labor Day, and people often say that these campaigns get started after Labor Day, especially in places that are so summer centric and late August centric in their outdoor enjoyment, like Minnesota. After Labor Day, it's full time pedal to the metal stuff, and Donald Trump's contribution as a president is so woeful. It's so painful. It is so bad for this country, and the complicit Republican Congress to go along with him. They've just lost all moral and political grounds on which to make their argument. It is stunning to me, and I have a feeling there's a big blue wave coming, as people like to call it. But I am always unnerved and nervous about if that's actually going to be a turnout to the level that we want it. And that's why stations like this, conversations about politics and other things that are important to matter so much. Do you have a sense, Hunter, about this big blue wave? Do you think we're going to get the faithful voters? We're going to get new voters, and we're going to get people that have a whole new passion to be out there voting? Do you have a sense about how this is going in our post primary election week?
Oh yeah, I definitely see a lot of new energy. I've had so many. Personally, so many different people come up to me asking them, how do I register to vote? How do I get involved with this? How do I door knock? Like, there's 10, 20 people that came just to me asking these questions. So the enthusiasm is there. Mm-hmm. And one point I want to make, too, as the Democratic Party starts adopting these more progressive platform things, the right-wing media has been struggling to attack them because for such a long time, the Democratic Party was going for like tax incentives and very confusing policies, and the right-wing media just took that and just was able to throw that down. But when they're saying Medicare for all or tuition-free public college, they can't attack it because people go, well, that sounds good to me.
Right. Right. It's hard to attack. It's much harder to attack a good idea than a mediocre idea, right? There is no doubt about that. And very often the Democratic Party has tended to say, let's go for the middle of the road idea because that will bring more people in. And as it turns out, it doesn't, because people are compelled by a good idea, and they're compelled by winning the argument. And what I've been impressed with by progressives, and I've been swung on some issues that progressive candidates and progressive politics holds to in recent years, and it's been great. I feel like people who hold progressive ideas have been working hard to make the argument, and working hard to win the argument, and working hard to engage in the conversation and the debate. And I think that goes a long way. I think that's incredibly important. That most of us, if you look back at your own life and think about when you changed your mind, it wasn't the first time you heard an idea. It was the 11th time you heard an idea that had finally sunk in, and you said, maybe there's something to it. It's just the work we have to do. So this is Doug Pagitt. I heard that music playing, Hunter. I won't keep talking. We'll go into a break. AM 950, the Progressive Voice of Minnesota. We'll be back with Ryan Parker in a moment. Hey, welcome back. AM 950, Progressive Voice of Minnesota. Doug Pagitt in at drive time. 4:34 there in the great state of Minnesota. It's 5:34 where I am. I'm calling in from West Michigan, and I don't know, 2:34. I think out where Ryan Parker is. Ryan Parker is our film partner, our conversation partner around what's happening in media, in film, and the rest. And as you know, if you've listened before to Ryan works in helping people connect with films that have social impact. And it matters a lot. Hey, Ryan, good to chat with you.
Hey, Doug, thanks for having me back. How are you?
I'm doing quite well. We just had big primaries this week in the state of Minnesota. So some people are still recalibrating after the feeling of their candidates winning or not winning. And so we now know who the slate of candidates are going to be. So on the political side, that's happening. And, you know, it's also summer in Minnesota, and it's coming to an end. It's August 17th, which, you know, just for people who get depressed about winter, it feels like it's sneaking up. It's hot outside, but you can feel it in the sky that the fall is approaching, and also on the calendar. You probably get a bit of that in Southern California, right? You feel like, hey, it's August, and soon it's going to be 5 degrees cooler when it's January.
You know, this is the lamest joke, but we have two seasons. We have tourist season and award season. And the weather never changes between the two.
I didn't know that. That's a great line. Hey, Ryan, we were talking earlier that political movements and social movements have, as long as there has been film, have been greatly impacted by the public opinion as it is shaped by media, and especially by the medium of film. It really, movies, even in this day of like long run television series and all the rest, movies still have an impact on how we view ourselves as a society and how we think about our imagination of our social life and our political life together.
That's a great point. And I don't know that you could find a stronger example of that in two films of the same name, with The Birth of a Nation, right? Which in 1915, I think, is D.W. Griffith's, most people thought then, masterpiece, one of the first big blockbuster epics. And then you look at 2014 or 2015, The Birth of a Nation by Nate Parker, and two completely different films, right? Two completely different Americas. Right. But yet the same, and Nate Parker taking that title to kind of push back against the dominant narrative in film history, or at least one of the more quote unquote important films in film history, but one that is extremely racist and very problematic to watch now. Yeah,
I saw it. It was maddening beyond belief. There's something about the size of a movie theater and of a film that it's almost like walking into the woods or walking into, you know, a mountain range, or for some people they walk into a cathedral or something. It's the scale of the screen is so much bigger than you that it's different than your home television set or your computer or your handheld, you know, iPad or phone that you're watching it on, that you feel a set of proportionality to. The largeness of the screen just makes a statement that's more than what you get out of those other mediums.
For people of faith, it's the difference between worshiping in St. Paul's Cathedral and watching a local access broadcast of your local Baptist church.
Of your religious meeting.
Right?
Yeah, that's great. Yeah. Yeah, it's
so I mean, it's the whole mechanism, and I think Griffith, to his credit, I guess you could say, understood the power of sight and sound. Movies were never silent; there was always music accompanying them. And to watch a film, and it's why studios are so eager for influencers to watch on a theater or in a theater. When what makes our life so much easier with the work we do is, can we please just provide them with the screening link to watch at home? And studios still are aware of the power of a darkened room, and which does feel like some people speak about it in spiritual terms, but it's much more effective.
Yeah, it's really true. And one of the things that, even though the media or the conservative media tends to claim that Hollywood is this like hyper uber progressive kind of narrative, we don't actually see a lot of examples of true progressive or liberal social movements or political movements being advocated by the use of the film technology and of films. But it does happen on the conservative side. A lot of these war films, they're very conservative in their orientation. The films like you've mentioned, some other ones are out now, one called Death of a Nation. Conservatives, for whatever reason, have taken upon themselves the requirement to use this big public medium, and then those same conservatives condemn Hollywood, whatever that is. They condemn Hollywood for being all in the hip pocket of the liberals, but the product that's actually coming out, that's shaping the imagination, it's not very much toward a more hopeful social movement or political change movement. It's curious. Do you know anything? Is there anything coming out soon? Anything that you're seeing that's sort of the buzz of Hollywood that's going to stir people's social movement or political imagination?
I don't know. That's a great comment. I mean, I think the only agenda that I've ever seen in Hollywood is money, and studios will do whatever it takes to chase that agenda, to push that agenda. So if they feel that there is an upswell of, say, more progressive thought or movement, then maybe they respond with creation of content that mirrors that. But I don't know that it's been great at taking the lead to advocate for that. I mean, you can look at we're in the Trump era now, and the Me Too movement and the Time's Up, and the ways in which there's a desire for stronger female leads or more diverse casts. Those things are inherently good, but I would wonder what are the motivations behind that, and why there's a call for that. Is it because there seems to be the market for that? In terms of content that's coming out, I mean, you have Michael Moore, his upcoming documentary, right? November, 11/9.
Yeah.
I think more recent, you have Spike Lee's Black Klansman, which I've yet to see. I have to admit, I'm going tomorrow, actually.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I haven't seen it either.
And how widely does that play, right? Because apparently he's weaving this event, telling a story of a true person who actually infiltrated the KKK. But from what I've read about the film, he's also weaving that with contemporary footage about racism and police brutality, protest movements in modern day America. So it'll be really interesting to see how that plays, and how, or if any effect it has on some of the movements that you're kind of hinting at.
Yeah, I'm really I'm thrilled with those movies, and there's been a number of them that have helped me personally, and I know helped a number of other people think about the Black experience, the Black community's experience in America. It's a big deal, and it's been very helpful. But it also has felt very late, right? It has clearly been filling a need that people know exists out there. Being a culture leader and helping to shape it, I feel like conservatives still have an upper hand on that. And I would like to say to filmmakers or people who are thinking about it, or funders who want to fund films, take seriously the idea of the power of film or of television or any kind of popular media to shape the social perspective and the political imagination that people have. Right? I don't know if I ever told you about this, but I met a woman one time at an event, a funeral event for a family member of hers that I was involved in. She lived in L.A. and I asked her what she was working on. And as people say when they live in L.A., she said, "Well, I'm working on a screenplay that I'm working on," and I found that interesting.
Everybody out here,
right? It's what you have to do, right? You have to go to the beach and you have to be working on your screenplay. And she said, "I said, well, what's the film about?" And she said, "Well, think a bit about the Planet of the Apes narrative, like the original movie, where these men get into a spaceship, they end up traveling the speed of light, and time for them moves over like 2 years, but for people on Earth, time moved 100 years, right? Because they were moving at the speed of light, so they only aged a couple of years, but on Earth it was 100 years. That's her premise." She said, "Then they come back to Earth, and when they land, they realize that peace and participation has broken out all over the planet." So she takes this notion of sort of a dystopian future and she pitches it as a utopian future. And the story of the we sure don't. We sure don't. That's why people have to turn to other things, right? They turn to fiction or they turn to religion or something, right, to give themselves a utopian imagination, because the rest of our culture and society tends to avoid it so strongly. So in her movie, the struggle and the drama is, what do these two guys who are 100 years back in cultural development, how do they survive in a world where the rules have changed? And then what she wants to do in the film, I think it's just a great idea, and I'm using this as an example of how I think we could think about telling the story of the world we live in. She said, what I want to do is take things that are happening now in little places and imagine what they would look like 100 years from now if they were to be given cultural support and success. So the things that the culture, in the movie, the things that the culture is operating on is that somebody figured out some way to negotiate peace with police and those that they're trying to stop from harming someone. And little projects that are happening in small places become 100 years developed in her imagination. And this is the kind of thing I think we need to do, is to tell a story through film about what the world would look like if the progressive social movement, human kindness efforts that we were engaging in were to actually happen. So anyway, I just hope those kinds of films come out. Do you know anything like that?
I think it's a great idea. Yeah. The problem is we've got to find people with money that want to invest in those ideas, but they're too busy, and rightfully so, investing in candidates to try to bring us back, from the brink, so to speak.
Oh, that's a good point. Hey, Ryan, just for people who don't know, how much money does it take for someone to make a film, like a film that you would see at a theater, even if you'd see it at like an independent theater or let alone a blockbuster? How much money does that take to put that thing together?
There is no rule. I mean, it's contingent on so many different factors, not the least of which is who is in your movie and who is directing your movie and how many theaters you want in it. I mean, even down to how many people actually speak in your film, because that impacts your budget. I will tell you a quick story though about the kind of state of the business that we're in. And I've written about this. I have a book on these, kind of the history of this production company that was tied to a church in Albany, Georgia, which is about an hour and a half or so away from Atlanta. They made a film back in 2003, I believe it was, for $20,000.
Okay.
It did not get theatrical distribution, but they did have a deal with Blockbuster when Blockbuster was still a thing. That deal made them a little bit of money, which they turned and reinvested in their next project. And that film cost them $100,000, and it was released in theaters.
Really?
Cut to next year, they are about to release their sixth film. Its budget will probably be somewhere in the range of $3-4 million, and they probably will make close to 30 or 40 million at the box office. So, this is a company, and my argument at the end of my book was, because it's a very conservative company. It's the part of a Southern Baptist church. A lot of their films are kind of evangelical propaganda. My question was, where is the progressive alternative to this? And not necessarily tied to a church.
Yeah, that's right.
Where is a community that wants to band together to do exactly what you're talking about? And I think it's easier now than ever for people to get films seen. I think it's probably easier now than ever to get films made. If you have some resources, the technology is more user friendly and cheaper than it's ever been. You know, I mean, Tom Hanks's line in the Nerdist podcast was, "You have no excuse," right?
Yeah.
20, 30 years ago, an actor or a filmmaker had excuses. You know, I didn't get the audition. I didn't get along with the producer. I had a bad agent.
Yeah.
Now you make it and throw it up on YouTube, or you sell it to a distributor, and it's on all the platforms that people can see it. And
well, that is awfully encouraging.
That I've kind of been beating outside of work that I do around people that will listen, is that can we build a community of like-minded, progressive thinkers who believe in, as you're saying, the power of stories to move the needle, right? To change people's hearts.
Hey, I love that. Ryan, can you hang on as we go over to the break, and then we're going to get to Sam. He's got some thoughts about how much it takes to make a film, because we need to impact the broader cultural conversation in order for politics to catch up.
Sure.
AM 950, Progressive Voice in Minnesota. We'll be back with you after the break. The local context in which we're going to have a progressive movements that run from movies to voting booths, from the broader cultural conversation to how people think about their world. Because as it turns out, people are shaped by a lot of forces, and some of those forces are the ones in the media. And for whatever reason, progressive social movement ideas are slow to catch on in films, and we'd love to see that happening in music, film, literature, poetry, sports, the whole thing. It would really be great. Hey, Sam from Edina, you've got some thoughts on how much it takes for a film to be made. What are your thoughts on this?
Yeah. Hi there. I used to work in that industry a bit, and I have a little bit of perspective to offer. First of all, I just want to say, back in 1992, so about, 26 years ago, Robert Rodriguez produced a movie called El Mariachi, and he produced most of it all in Mexico.
Right.
So he was able to do it for about $7,000 up front. And then he cut all kinds of back-end deals so that basically once he achieved distribution through Columbia, he was able to pay a bunch of people additional money above and beyond that. And that ended up costing about $200,000 total, including the back-end deals. And then he got international distribution, and it grossed like $2 million at the box office and launched his career.
Yeah.
So, but all of this happened before everything was digital. And these days, so transfer to film, editing on film, stuff like that was really expensive back then, and that was a lot of those back end deals that I was just talking about. These days, you can get a film quality capable, as in go to the movie theaters and sit down and watch it. So a 4K capable, digital video rig for I want to say at least $4,000 or $5,000 will get you a decent one. And then at that point, you can produce some amazing footage at that point.
Are you still in the industry at all, Sam?
Not really, really. But I obviously have the experience of what it was like back then, and I know how to do it still.
So maybe somebody who's listening to this and they say, you know what, my friend, my daughter, my granddaughter, she's got an idea for a film, and I've always wondered if it's worth doing. Do you have a sense of it being a social force and a social power that could move on social movements and progressive political thought?
Well, absolutely. It used to be that you had to get a distribution deal from your film. Well, these days you have this thing called YouTube that one or two people use, and there's no barrier to entry. If you produce a quality product, all you have to do is put it out there. You've got YouTube, Vimeo, Facebook. You've got all of these different methods of distribution, and the only cost is for the equipment, which even for that matter could be rented at a fraction of that cost. And then for the talent and the people who actually know how to do this stuff to make it sound good and make it look good with the lighting and the cameras and all that.
Yeah.
So
that's great. Hey, Ryan, what do you think?
Doable.
Ryan, what are your responses to that? How are you thinking? You give an amen to that?
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, I think the biggest challenge, though, is how do you cut through the clutter? I mean, because there is YouTube and billions of users and billions of hours of content, is it absolutely is easier than ever to get it out there. And as Sam said, the barriers to entry are so low. But the question I think you're asking is a bit bigger: is how does that begin to shape a conversation? And I think that may be harder than ever. Right? Isn't that how effective is the work that you make, and who are the partners that you have to do that? What is it about what you're doing that stands apart? Right? Is it, or do you have a star attached to it? Has it gone viral on YouTube, for example?
Yeah.
I think most people would pray for something like that. Or, what approach are you taking? I was just thinking about this when we were on the break. Is, in signing the defense spending bill last week, Trump signs this bill, and then you mean to tell me that we can't somehow afford greater access to health care for more people, for example.
Yeah, it's ridiculous.
Well, what does that look like in a narrative? Do you make a documentary about the need for health care for more people, or do you tell a story about, so is it a narrative or a doc? All these decisions and how you kind of cut through the clutter is, it's a challenge.
Well, Ryan, I appreciate. Go ahead, Sam.
Up another thought.
We just have a minute left, but go ahead,
if you don't
Sam.
mind.
No.
Okay. I just want to point out crowdfunding actually is another way that people can get something funded if they have a great idea. I think there are a gazillion different documentaries getting made. I think that if we could tell a story that actually is organized around a point that we want to make, and crowdfunding, GoFundMe or Kickstarter or anything like that, would be a way to be able to raise the budget to be able to do any kind of a film.
Yeah, that's a great idea. Well, hey, Ryan, hey, Sam, thanks so much. Thanks for your passion about this, of course, and for both of you caring so much about it. Ryan, thanks for the good work you do in getting social films out. Let's win the argument as well as the election, friends. AM 950, Progressive Voice of Minnesota. Doug Pagitt will be back with you on Monday. Enjoy the weekend.